Good evening all. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 23rd of June 2026 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:30 p.m. I welcome staff, elected members, members of the community and the media. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. We'll now deal with attendances, apologies and leaves of absence. Look, for those who don't know me, I'm Rick Powell. I'm the Deputy Mayor of the City of Subiaco and I'm standing in for the Mayor, David McMullen, who has other duties tonight. So, elected members, there are 7 attending in person: Councillors De Vries, Jones, O'Connor, Johnson, Burns and Fife, and Councillor Pine has approval to attend by electronic means. The executive leadership team is all here as well. The Chief Officer, Executive Officer, Colin Cameron, the Director of Technical Services, James Hamby, Director of Corporate Services, Elizabeth Connolly, Director of Business Improvement, Lynette Solomons, and Director of Development Services, Alex Petrosky. And the Mayor McMullen is an apology. Leave of absence. Look, we won't be dealing with leave of absence requests tonight. We'll deal with those next week where voting is required. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? Well, I have a disclosure of interest. I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C1 to be considered by the Council at its meeting on the 23rd of the 6th, 2026. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality, pursuant to clause 22(2) of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is my house is listed on the local heritage survey. Thank you. If I can get that. There are no approved deputations tonight. Announcements by the presiding member. Look, I'll leave that to the Mayor for next week. So that will take us, I think, to the officer reports for discussion only. Look, I've seen many questions of staff on items on the agenda for tonight's meeting on our communications channel. Look, if any of you feel the need to get those questions and responses on the public record, feel free to do that tonight, but there's no obligation to do so. So we'll start with C1, Draft Shetton Park Precinct Local Heritage Survey, preparation post-advertising. Are there any questions on this item? No questions? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, but Councillor Burns, go ahead.
Look, it's just out of idle curiosity, but this document that extends over 1,000 odd pages, right? Is that? It seems to me to be. Oh, hang on. No, it's all right. I thought it was all internal, but it's actually prepared by. There's reports in here also by Hocking Heritage, etc. I was about to ask, is it all ours? And then. Sorry, I just saw that on one page, so I removed the question. It's a Hocking document in part at least. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No other questions on C1? Okay, look, we'll move to C2 then, the heritage list proposals, consideration, post-advertising. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Powell. Yes, look, I just wondered, I've got a couple of questions here. I wondered if it's possible, this is through you to CEO or Director Petrovsky, is it, I've noted that there are, I think, about 13 properties that support this listing, that their properties going to be listed. There are 4 properties with objections. Is it possible that we could put up an alternate or an amendment to deal with the properties that objected separately and engage further with them and then have those properties come back to council?
Thank you. Well, yes. Pass that one to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So the short answer is yes. We've listed all the properties, so it's quite easy by way of a modification through the amendments alternatives process to remove any property that's listed there.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. So that would be something that we could get some assistance from you with how we would put up. It would be an amendment. Would that be the case? Or yeah, thank you. So we can talk about that next week. Thanks. The other thing I wondered too, they're all designated level 2, proposed level 2 listing. What extent of the building or the premises does that cover? Like, I was sort of under the impression it covered the facade, and obviously it covers the facade. How far, does it mean you have to keep the first rooms if you wanted to do some sort of renovation? What's the extent of the property that's sort of protected?
Dr. Petrosky.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So with a heritage area, which this is not, generally that looks at the public-facing elements, with a heritage list proposal, it's determinative on each individual property and place. So there'd be a heritage place record that would detail the elements which are subject to the heritage requirements, and that would be a future decision of the local government on if there is a development proposal. It doesn't mean that an element can't be modified. It just means that there's careful consideration on that element. So to answer your question, each place will have its own record which will list the points that have heritage value. So that might be aesthetic value, it might be cultural value, and each property will have its own. And any development application can then be considered, and there'd be greater weight on the heritage considerations as listed in that place record. So it doesn't mean things can't change. There's a level of understanding and consideration on any changes.
Further question?
Yes, thank you. I've got a few questions. Thank you. The other question I've got is what level of engagement do we have with the people that objected? How has that been? What sort of engagement have we had following the objections?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So we have undertaken significant engagement activities as part of this process. As part of the correspondence that we sent to property owners, we did invite them to meet with Heritage Officer. So that some owners took that opportunity up. We can't force people to meet with us, but the offer was provided for that. And obviously we're available to speak to them via phone or via email if they had any inquiries, if they had any questions about what a heritage listing would mean. Most of them, given that their properties are already heritage protected places, being in heritage areas, they have a general understanding of heritage, but the offer and the opportunity was provided to them.
And just on continuing on from that, did you do any sort of information question answer session? I know for the Park Street, Olive Street precinct that was done. I attended myself.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. We didn't do those specific engagement activities primarily because they're already heritage protected places. So with the example for the Park Street heritage area, I remember that attending that myself and presenting. That is because it's a bit more of a step up from having no heritage protection to having heritage protection. So going back to my previous answer, it does come down to a lot to education and their understanding of already being a heritage protected place. So we didn't think it was necessary.
Just a final one. You mentioned the communication that you had with people that objected. Are we able to get a copy of their submission, their objection submission and that communication?
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, that's already provided as part of the pack, but we can highlight that for you.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was summarised, not the actual objection in full.
Thank you. I'll double check that. So there will be submissions in full that we should be able to provide. And there's also a schedule of submissions which has the summary from each and every submission made.
Thank you.
I see that Councillor Pine has her hand up. Have you got a question, Councillor Pine?
Yes, I do. In the past, do we have any case precedents of not approving some houses on the heritage list at the request of owners? And if so, what would be the basis for not proceeding with putting a house on the heritage list?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So from my time at the city in the past 8 years, I don't remember any instances where the city hasn't put a recommended place on a heritage list. There was a group of properties which came about a year ago, and there were objections. However, council did consider them and still resolved to keep the places on the heritage list. That's not an exhaustive answer because obviously there was people before me and people before that. So I would be fairly certain that there have been times where council has considered, probably in different legislation, not to put many properties on the heritage list. There was a heritage consideration in the early 2000s, and I believe that's probably the one where many properties weren't included on the heritage list. On the basis of, on what basis could council not put properties on the heritage list? It's up to council discretion. So we've provided an assessment based with the heritage guidelines. So that's one consideration in putting a property on the heritage list. The other consideration is also the submissions received from property owners. So it's up to council to weigh up and balance those submissions with the weight of the heritage and what it means to retaining significant heritage value for generations going into the future. It is a difficult subject sometimes, so each elected member will have to form their own opinion and view on that. And there is a report and recommendation from officers providing you one option. There are also other options in the report.
Thank you.
If I can, through the chair, just to clarify that every decision before council is on its own merits. So it doesn't necessarily mean what council has done in the past. And just if I could draw your attention to the full submissions start on 1,274 of the attachments, and there's the officer's response, and that will guide you in your decision making in terms of for next week. Thank you.
Councillor
Thank you.
Rees.
Yeah, I have just checked again with some of the comments from the objectors, and one of the concerns was around additional bureaucracy costs and policy constraints beyond existing heritage area controls. Just to clarify, do any improvements and any kind of work on the house, does it have to go through an approved heritage architect, or can it go through a general architect who's able to manage that? So is that concern around additional costs a reasonable one? Thank you.
Thank you. And through your presiding member, needing to get planning approval is an additional step to not needing to get planning approval. So yes, obviously there are some additional steps. It's not mandated that a heritage architect needs to be involved. The city does provide incentives to have a heritage advisory service. So we have a panel of architects which people can choose to influence and put input into the design. So that's no additional cost. And just the general way that the city's policies and heritage protection is set up is to try to minimise any additional bureaucracy that actually applies because of that additional heritage listing. The legislation also includes a clause which allows for any variation or any development control to be varied where you are actually having a good heritage outcome. So it has to be commensurate to the heritage outcome. So that's actually quite a powerful clause that allows you to get some good design options, which you may not have that ability if you just have the general regulation. So yes, there are some additional steps involved, but through legislation and city incentives, we feel that we balance that additional bureaucracy. Manager, is there anything else?
Yeah, thanks, Director Petrosky. So we have got or Council's got a local planning policy, which is numbered 7.7, which is development approval exemptions. It's worth a look if you haven't looked at it for a while or at all. That sets out in a quite easy to read table format certain types of development and works and activities that can occur if you have no heritage protection, if you're in a heritage area, or if you're in a heritage list. So we're quite proactive in that space, and probably more so than other local governments, where we have a suite of exemptions that apply to typical improvements that you can do. So, for instance, if your property is on the heritage list, you can still do things like kitchen fit outs and bathroom fit outs, provided there's no structural alteration. So it is quite generous, and there's obviously a range of other works and activities that can occur. And it's not too dissimilar to what can already occur for a heritage area. There are some differences, but it's not too dissimilar.
Councillor Fife.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor Powell. I'll bring that here. My question is do we know whether or not the listing of a property on a heritage list has an impact on the value of the house or the property? So, it was worth $4 million yesterday. It's now on a heritage list. Is it worth more? Is it worth less? Do we have any gauge for that? Is being put on a heritage list a penalty for the owner?
Well, that's a loaded question. Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So the answer is yes and no, and it depends. So when a valuer is going to be undertaking a valuation, they will be considering the heritage for that particular property and what's considered. So it's an additional consideration, and they may have a discount on that. But in general, when you have Subiaco as a well-loved heritage area, that in and of itself is probably pushing values up, because it's a beautiful place where people want to be with the heritage values. So, and then in addition, you do have that clause which, any development control can be varied. So whether or not that pushes up the value, it really depends on what that specific property is and what's actually heritage listed and what you can or can't do. Perhaps for full-scale redevelopment, the value of the site may be diminished, but it may be uplifted in other ways as I've discussed.
Councillor Johnson.
Just thank you, and just continuing on that line of questioning, one of the properties that's before us for consideration is a commercial property on Rockaby Road, and the ceiling is being nominated for heritage listing, is my understanding. So the front of the house is not old, the back of that, not the house, the commercial premises is not old, north the rear. So the only element to this property is the ceiling. What impact would that have if that was listed, do you think, on its ability to, redevelop going forward, and on the value of the property? I'm presuming they'd have to keep the ceiling with whatever happened.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So that's an interesting property. The short answer is the ceiling and any changes to that will be considered. So it doesn't say that the ceiling actually has to remain. The ceiling may be changed in some instances. It may be reinterpreted, or it may need to remain depending on what the proposal is. The interesting part on that property is that it's in a heritage area, but the front part of the building is actually not the part that has the heritage values. It's actually the intricacy of the ceiling of the former King's Hall that has the heritage values. So by the proposal to include it on the heritage list, we will actually be giving the parts of the building that have heritage value the protection. I think it's discussed in the heritage place record that it's not actually the front of it that that has a heritage value. It's just how it was captured in the previous heritage area, which was done some time ago. But to go back to the part of your question, whatever happens with the ceiling, yes, it's an integral part, an integral component. It doesn't say that the ceiling can't be modified wholly or partly. It would just really need to be considered and how that all fits into the future.
Councillor De Vries.
I note that through you, presiding member, I note that the consideration in this heritage report is by association. Could it be possible to argue that if many people are unaware of the association, that it doesn't carry that value? So in order to make it have that value, we'd need to do an advertising campaign to make everyone aware. Like, is there an implied understanding in the community that we know that it has this historical association? Because this is the first time I realised it had that long-term history myself. But is that something that the city would consider to support the heritage of this building, is to give it some significance and prominence? Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, we have a rolling program of celebrating our heritage. So it's not something that we don't do. It's something that we can beef up and perhaps do more of. And it's something that we can consider. So there's no issues in continuing to promote heritage of a particular building or more buildings in general.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. Am I right in thinking that as part of this consideration of this item, we've upgraded the heritage information that we have for some of these places on what we had before?
Thank you, and through you, presiding members. Yes, so as a result of some of the submissions, our heritage consultant has gone out to get additional information on some of the properties. So it has been developed further from what we had previously.
And I guess following on from that, does that provide owners and the city much clearer information about the cultural significance than perhaps we had before?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. I think, yes, additional information is always good, and a lot of good information we get is from current owners as well. So I think the development of heritage, it occurs over time, and the information and the stories are uncovered, and through our heritage consultant that has assisted the city with the preparation of this, and through information that the city has gathered along the way, our understanding as the city, and also the community's understanding of the importance of these buildings and their contribution to the broader city is better known.
Several of the buildings, the paper notes, several of the properties are on the Heritage Council of Western Australia's assessment program, and they've therefore been identified as possibly of state significance. Are you able to explain, I guess, from picking up comments or questions that have been asked before about bureaucracy and everything, how that impacts decision making, and how the city will consider that as well? I mean, state listing is the top level of listing in WA. So how does that interface work?
Thank you for the question, and through you, presiding member. So there are different levels of significance, as you mentioned. So what is important to the state may not necessarily be important locally, and vice versa. So in this case, there are a number of properties within Subiaco and subject to this particular council report that have been identified as being of potential state significance. So there's a process that those will be undertaken and go through to determine the merits and the assessment to see whether they're worthy of being included on the state register. But as I said, a property could be on the state register and that's its importance to the broader state. And potentially not locally listed, and the other way around equally. So, but it's not uncommon to have properties on the local list and also the state list.
My question was really also about decision making in terms of change and bearing in mind their status at the moment of being on the assessment program. If they were to move on to the heritage list, how does that work in terms of decision making?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So that means that the Heritage Council would have a referral sent to them, and the city would be bound to act consistent with the advice received by the Heritage Council. It doesn't mean change can't happen. I mean, the Subiaco Hotel are now expanding out and they are on the state list. There's been changes to the Regal Theatre with the great new development. They're on the state list, and Subiaco Oval itself is on the state list. So it doesn't mean that things can't change. It means that really important heritage elements like the heritage gates at Subi Oval are retained, and it's just another level of review. It's all built into legislation, into timeframe, so it's encapsulated in the standard referral timeframe. So there's not necessarily an additional timeframe that people need to go through. And then there are also state heritage grants, which are then available to those properties.
I might also ask a question if I can. It relates to a document request that was made virtually at the start of these questions. And I'd like clarification of what's actually being sought. There is in the agenda the summary of the objections and the staff response. There is in the attachments, in attachment 3, there is a longer explanation. So perhaps, Councillor Johnson, you can explain what are you after something additional to that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, as you say, I will need to review this and I can get back to you, but my understanding it's a summary we've been provided with, and I was asking for the actual submission from the people that objected, not the summary.
So you're seeking the original. Okay, thank you. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So if you look, apologies for the long document on page 1274. We include the whole submission. We just redact personal details. So the whole submission that people have provided is included, and a response from the officers is there.
Sorry, could you repeat the number, please?
1274. So if you've got a PDF document, it's got hyperlinks. If you open up the hyperlinks, you can get there pretty quick.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Burns.
So excuse my casualness, presiding member. Yeah, look, I'm just... Firstly, I'm a little wary, and I don't want to end up I'm trying to clear up as much of this tonight because I'm concerned on the presumption, firstly, that as Councillor Johnson mentioned, that whether it's an amendment or it's an alternative, that there was a division between the 13 people that have not commented, and consequently, we presume it's acquiescence by silence. But we've got 4 that have dealt with it. I'm going to refer to different degrees. I'm looking for documents where, and I can't see them, but not summaries, but if any of these four people or individuals or group of individuals have written back and said, all right, this is what I think, not whether it's an email or it's a report or whatever else, where do I see it? Where do I actually see a response from the owner or a response from the owner's best friend or anybody else that has sent it in? Where am I looking?
CEO, can you help with that? Mark, you got it.
Yeah, just in the attachments, if you probably click in the box, it's the easiest on page number and go to page 1274. The names have been excluded, but the full submission is there, as is the property. It says object or support, and the full submission is there, and side by side to that is the officer comment.
I thought what Councillor Johnson was asking for, and if she's not, it's what, I would like, is actually to see not our interpretation of it, but actually, I don't mind if you black out, the signature or anything else, but if it's written by this one, for instance, that's, okay, I'm looking at this Hocking one. Okay, well, I don't know. Look, this is just so hard. Look, I'd like to see the actual documents. If somebody wrote in their objection by email or they had a consultant write it in, I would like to see that comment, not summarised or retyped or anything else, if that's possible. I'll just carry on and perhaps you can answer all of these together. My other concern, again on the presumption that we're only dealing with 4 properties, not 17, right? How do we get through this? I mean, with 3 minutes or whatever we've got to speak on each one, and something, you could literally debate each one of these individually and run out of the time, in my opinion. If you look to Pharmacy 777 or the old hall, just the questions with regards to, for instance, the ceiling. Okay, well, okay, there's no doubt about the ceiling. However, the ceiling's been, largely built out, and I'm going to presume by planning approvals from the city, where it's now behind glass walls, there's been mezzanines put in there, all these sort of things affecting it. You look at the Chester property, not Richard Diggins' one, because he supports it, but next door, which is, an important house, but I think not the current owner, but the previous owner tore the whole back of it down. I mean, it's really only just... Yeah.
Point of order.
Yes, what...
Councillor Burns is entering into a debate. I'd be interested to hear his question. Thank you.
I appreciate that. My question's this: how do we get through it? This is a briefing. My point is about the item. Okay, so my question is, how are we possibly going to, even if it's only 4, not 17, how do we actually get through it? If I've got 5 minutes to talk about 4 separate properties, and everybody else does, how are we actually going to manage this? That's the point of my question, okay? And then I'll go on to the other documents I'm looking for. Thanks.
Director of Development Services, have you got...
I might go first.
Every meeting is up to the presiding member, but ordinarily what we would expect is, as described earlier, that there might be an amendment to withdraw one of the items or more of the items, and each ordinarily would be dealt with individually and debated and determined whether to include it or not. So usually it's a mover and a seconder, and then the mayor or presiding member ordinarily tests any amendments. So if there's 4 amendments that come in, we deal with that first one first. Whoever put it in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, go through that, and that might be to remove X, for example, and then it would be debated on that matter.
Okay, so Appreciate that, CEO. So in essence, it would be something along the lines of 13, for want of a better word, en bloc, okay? And then houses 1, 2, 3 and 4, whatever else, but they're not together as an item to be removed. They're individually, do we remove this one to give it further consideration? Do we move that one? And we do them one at a time so we can speak at them one at a time.
If I could, through the chair, it's up to the presiding member to determine, but that makes most sense to me. The mayor will be the presiding member, but in order to make sure that it's simple, as I said, dealing with each amendment separately would make a lot of sense, given that you may have 1 or 2 amendments or 3 amendments. So ordinarily, that's the easiest way for the presiding member to deal with it.
Yep.
Look, I appreciate that, and I'm sure between now and noon next Monday, we can get some sort of wording that would help in getting in that direction, whoever's going to put it forward. My questions would also go to this. This is not a blame thing, so it's not debate. It's for instance, if you look at the demolition of the back of the Chester property, which arguably nobody here demolished, okay, or voted to demolish, but it was done under with approval, I'm sure. Or if you look at the alterations to Pharmacy 777, the hall that were made by ex-councillor Rowe in creating these multitude of mezzanines pretty much in every direction, which again would be, I'm going to presume he got approval from the council, okay? Is it possible for me to see, or the elected members to see, and this and the other 2 properties that I'm less familiar with, what took place and when and why? I just, if the ceiling's important, but I can't now, and I think Councillor De Vera said she hadn't even seen it, you've got to look up to see it, but there's very little, left to see, and that's on the presumption it's all glass. I'd like to see the approvals that, even though I'm not saying anybody here approved them, but I think some of them date back pretty recently. I think the Chester property is far older. But what information do we have on when, I'm used for want of a better word, when these things were damaged as such? So we're now sort of saying, okay, they're important, but at some stage, arguably, they weren't, right? So I'm interested in the history of how we got to what we're looking at now, that we're now saying we want to do it, because some of these, the events are part of my decision-making process. That's why I'd like the information.
Right, I think we've got the question. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through your presiding member. So the issue is that the Heritage Place record is the first place to start. So that's all the information that we have on the evolution of each and every property that's listed in there. So that will go through a timeline of how it was used or what approvals may have been there. Some things may have, some changes may have happened either without approval or without the need for approval either. So we've looked through our systems to populate those Heritage Place records to the best of our ability. We would have gone through databases that we have both internal and public to see what alterations have had to those properties, but it's never an exact thing that exactly what's happened, given that the properties have been around for some of them over 100 years. So we've done our best to capture what's there. Most of it's in the Heritage Place record, but even if there was an approval, it doesn't necessarily mean that approval is going to be acted on in any event.
Okay, I'll accept it. Then.
Yeah, yep.
All right.
Right.
Look, I can accept that things, to try to work out what happened and didn't happen, and records and how things have been digitised over the years. But at the same time, some of these, I suppose I could ask it differently, is there any disputing, right? And I'll wait to see the documents that from anybody that's written in to say any of the naysayers right, are saying because of why. I suppose the question would be, is there anything, could we also be advised if anything is in dispute? It's kind of like, our reason for no is this, but the city's saying, yeah, but actually that's not correct. You know what I mean? That there's actually, because it seems to me, I'm trying to get my mind around this, and it's not, it's not debate. It's a question. My concern is that there seems to be a
Point of order. When we start expressing concern, we're entering debate. Councillor Burns, could you just get a question out? Thanks.
I withdraw the word concern, okay. It's...
Perhaps Director Petrosky could help.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So that's neatly captured in the schedule of submission. So where an issue has been raised, it's been identified in a number, and that number has been responded to by the officers in the officer response. So if there's any difference in opinion for a particular property, that's in the schedule of submissions. What I will also say is that each schedule of submission has a number attached to it, and that's our record number. So we will provide those 5 or 6 objections in full, in the format that they've come in, I should say, not in full because they are already in full. But we'll provide elected members with that in the next day or so, just so you have that information. But yeah, and the disagreements or the differences of opinion are summarised in the submissions to say this was the issue that was raised by that submitter, and this is how officers respond to that.
I'm just trying to make sure that a week from now we're not. Yeah, I mean, we've had a few problems in the past recently, and so I'm just trying to avoid them. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I could through the chair. So basically the 2 types of attachments, which there's a lot of detail in them, but as has been pointed out, there's the original assessment, which has been done now, which has all that factual information, and then there's the submissions and the officer comments. So if you look at those 2 things together, those 2 attachments, that gives you what is now. And so as you quite rightly, places evolve over time, etc. We've tried as best as we can to capture that, and the recommendation to council is based on the information that we have now. So I encourage you to sort of look at the context and everything we've captured in relation to each of those properties, refer that back to the objection and the officer comment, and then it's up to council to weigh that information and determine whether it's appropriate or not to be included on the list.
Councillor Fife.
Sorry, so am I interpreting correctly that Director of Development Services was going to collate those individual properties into a separate email to the or a separate document to send to council with just those objections, and that is that what you were implying?
Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through presiding member, yes. So we'll give you those submissions because they're listed. But also, if you look at attachment 3, it details all the key issues raised by the objectors. So the next attachment, let's see what page that starts on. I think it's 1284. It's called attachment 3, key issues raised by objectors, and then it goes through an assessment of that as well.
Are there any further questions?
I've got one, Rick.
Councillor
My
Fine, go
question
ahead.
is, there are some properties that are being proposed to be heritage listed that are also in a heritage area. Could you help me understand what, I guess, additional constraints or differences does owner would experience if you're in a heritage area versus if you're actually heritage listed in terms of being able to develop the property?
Director Development Services or Manager of Planning.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So every property that's been recommended for inclusion on the heritage list as part of this item is already a heritage protected place. So that is within a heritage area under the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015. So inherently with heritage protected places, they have more development controls as you would if you weren't a heritage protected place. As mentioned earlier in one of the responses, there is, I guess, heritage areas are more for their streetscape appearance. So we're looking at the context of the development and the impact it has, not necessarily on its own building, but in terms of the streetscape more broadly. A heritage listing is more specific to the individual characteristics and traits of that particular building, based on the historical significance and a range of other factors. So there are distinct differences. Certain works, if you were in a heritage area now, wouldn't require development approval if you were in a heritage list. So as I mentioned in a previous answer, looking at local planning policy 7.7 development approval exemptions that the city has is a really good starting point to see what can be done and what needs approval. As the director, as Director Petrovski mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean if you're heritage listed, it doesn't mean you can't do certain works. It just means you require development approval and for those things to be considered. It's extremely common for heritage listed properties and properties in heritage areas to have works done to them, to change them, but it has to be done in a considered way that is supported by heritage.
Any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, I don't know whether this will bring any comfort to Councillor Burns, but you were asking about how you deal with the 17 items and 4 that were. It's just from, look, it's totally correct. It will be up to the presiding member next week. But in my experience, you know, the presiding member, the mayor has in past broken the items down. So that way you get each one. You get time to debate each one. That's not to say that that's what he will do, but it's my experience of what's happened in the past. So I don't know whether that brings you any comfort. All right, I think we're finished with C2. C3, tender, concrete pathworks, including curbing and other miscellaneous items. Are there any questions on this item? There are no questions on that. We'll move to C4, the Subiaco Theatre Arts Centre. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, through you, presiding member. The Theatre Gardens, my understanding is that it's an A-class reserve. Should that be listed on the business plan? It's not stated in the officer report, I don't think, or the business plan.
CEO?
Yeah, we could include its land tenure, not necessarily required. As I've previously described, this is sort of more of a local government act requirement to sort of start the process. But if that assists in identifying the property, we can do that.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of follow-up questions. With the current classification that it's an A-class reserve, and it lists the current purpose as Parklands Hall site and Functions Centre. So, and in our report and business plan, we come up with 4 other potential uses: education, performing arts, manual arts, food and beverage. What's the process to change those potential uses from what is currently listed?
CEO?
Yeah, if I can, through the process. As I said, this is more of the local government component of, and this wasn't around in the day when the last renovation was done back in the 80s. So the Local Government Act's 1995. And so this is really just starting a process. The suggestions there are just suggestions in that. So ultimately, as you're quite rightly aware, at the moment, it's leased to the Arts and Culture Trust, and there's 2 really great theatres within that. So it may just be that it stays the same. If we go through the process and there is additional uses, then there's a process by which we would go through to adjust the management order through the Department of Lands and ultimately the Minister for Lands, Minister Carey, in terms of if there is a requirement to adjust. But that would be a long way down the track, wouldn't need to be part of this process. This is just suggesting that it could do a range of things in addition to what it currently does, or complementary. So, but it comes down to the extent to which that change is required in terms of the use that is enabled under the Management Act. So it can be varied, but we would have to go through a long process that we would go through. This is just the first stage, but it could just be that it remains exactly as it is.
Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'll move on to C5, review of register of delegations and authorisations from Council to the CEO 2026-27. Any questions? Did you just ask Councillor Fife, or no? No. Anybody else got a question on this? All right. Was there a... okay, then we'll move on to one that crops up this time every year, the annual budget. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. And I see that there's been a document sent through answering a number of questions, but I haven't had a chance to look at that. I won't go through all of my questions tonight here, but I will ask a few. I'm not sure if they've already been covered or not. I was wondering, with the CCTV camera that's being talked about at the library capturing antisocial behaviour, will that be installed in such a way that it will capture antisocial behaviour out the front of the building there? And is there any opportunity to install some footage or CCTV to capture antisocial behaviour in front of the old 241 building?
CEO.
We can generally CCTV around our buildings is for the protection of that. And we may have Director of Corporate Services may want to respond to this answer as well, given previous. But on any building, we can attach CCTV to assist us in sort of managing any premise, and we do in certain areas. In addition, the antisocial behaviour aspect, we obviously have a framework in place to assist that, and we have access to mobile CCTV as well, and we're in the process of having an arrangement with the police as well so that they can easily access that should they need to, should it assist them in their policing activities. I'll probably end there and hand over.
Thank you, through you, presiding member. Colin's answered the question correctly. In terms of the CCTV at the library, the staff have worked with commercial services to actually look at where some of their blind spots and gaps are from internal as well as around the facility. In doing so, they'll actually have the ability to capture footage of that sort of park area in between the museum, the bus stop, and that, you know, side bit of the library. So to answer your question, that will actually provide assistance if we do receive inquiries from the police and need some extra footage. So we've addressed, I think, your question in terms of what we're doing there, if that's okay.
Follow up, Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. And specifically in front of the old council admin building at 241 Rockaby, will we be able to see any footage of antisocial behaviour in front of that building at night time?
I think with the current range of where we're looking at the back of the library, it'll only capture that bus stop, museum, garden area.
You mentioned you had a number of questions, Councillor Johnson. Do you have other ones that you wish to ask at this time? Any other questions? Councillor Fife.
Thank you. And my question is related to the connected communities. I asked a two-parted question, which was the dollar allocation, and I thank the Director of Corporate Services for the answer about the material budget, which is similar to what it was in 25-26. The second part of my question was, are there any further staff resources being allocated to the Positive Ageing project over 26-27?
CEO, Director of Corporate Services.
I'll start the response and, through you, presiding member, then get some assistance from my colleague here to comment on the cultural services element. So the budget that we've listed in the pack shows you the Positive Ageing program overall. So those workshops and activities and programs that you see on the ground, that's what that budget element that you see covers. Cultural services have a labour budget, which has their entire cultural services labour budget. So I'll get Alex to comment on that for you. And then what you'll also notice in cultural services is in their budget, say for the libraries, they'll also have programs, events and activities that will cover workshops that address positive ageing challenges and issues for our community as well. So it's a multifaceted approach. Alex, would you like to comment any further through you, presiding member?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So in terms of the additional resources, we're not looking at significantly increasing staff resources in that area. However, when we look at the work plans going forward and what we're achieving under our council plan, we can allocate more staff to different programs and things that we are doing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's only one staff or half a staff of 0.7 of staff working on positive ageing only, if that's what where you're coming from. It is a combined team effort, so we can allocate more staff as we need to for those types of activities. And it's a process we started some time ago, where the community development officers have a generalist title, and through the branch planning to link up with what we're doing in the council plan, there might be additional focus shifted for specific areas. So if there are more things that we need to do for positive ageing, there's no issue in allocating different staff to that as a need be, and we do that in any event. It's not just one person always dealing with it. It's a team effort. Yeah, and positive ageing, sorry, the CEO has just reminded me, positive ageing in and of itself is a very small line item in our budget, but the positive ageing program that we deliver is not just that small line item. It would go through the whole library budget, the whole museum budget, and also some of the stuff that we do in Lord's Recreation Centre and some of the classes they provide, and some of the free memberships they provide. So I know it looks like a one-liner positive ageing, but it actually goes across multiple areas and teams.
Councillor Fife, follow-up.
Yeah, so a follow-up question. So is my understanding right that for example, the establishment of the disability and inclusion program, that committee might be able to, through identification of certain services or desires or programs, be able to influence, even within the current financial year, the reallocation of certain resources towards identified needs that they might have?
Director of Development Services.
Thank you. Yes, so the Disability Access and Inclusion Group, as well as other factors, can absolutely assist us in directing our resources where we need to go. And we've got a flexible team structure who are ready to happy to help out on the council priorities.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Just on the positive ageing program that it's multi-program, multi-events. I've had some community feedback that one of the programs that we run, I think maybe it's chair yoga. I'm not entirely sure, but it's at Shenton Park. I believe it's very, very popular. So very good feedback about that program. One of the comments I've had received is that we don't limit who can attend. They can be Lords members, I think. And so there's a number of people within the City of Subiaco residents that can't actually get to join that. I'm wondering, is there some way that we can look at addressing this so that people within the City of Subiaco that are residents get to maybe get to the top of the list, or is there some way that we can ensure that residents get to be able to participate?
CEO, I think that's on for you.
Yeah, if I could, through the chair. Look, a number of local governments have had a try in terms of what you're sort of suggesting. I suppose what I would do is just refer back to section 3.11a, 3.1, good government of persons in its district. So if somebody comes into our district, we should provide them good government. So the question is, yes, ratepayers live here or do business here or own business properties here. How we would deal with that, we could probably look at some of the other examples of that. I know certainly in terms of aquatics and that, they've looked at discounts, etc. And you just sort of have to balance that up with the message that you're sending, whether it be, I think if the question is if people are being excluded because we're not doing enough, well, I think we should probably tackle that problem first, would just be my own personal view, because I prefer when local governments don't be that parochial and allow people that come to visit the opportunity to participate in what each local government's got to offer. But ultimately, we could have a workshop or something on that and explore what other local governments have done in that area. That's just my advice.
Director Petrosky?
Thank you. And through you, presiding member. So I think there's two different programs we're speaking about. So as part of some of the positive ageing stuff we do in Lords, that's targeted to Lords members. So there's a gold circuit and members which you, and that's some of the benefits you get as a Lords member. So that's tied to the fees and charges and what you get as a Lords member. There are discounts applied there as well. And there's also free membership for people 80 and above. But then there is another program so that's limited to Lords members, so that's a Gold Circuit program. But then there's some stuff that we're also doing in community development, and that's something like seated ballet, for example, and that's actually open to all residents, and it's only $10 per session, because the Lords stuff is for Lords members and the requirements around that. But we got the feedback that more people wanted to attend and not be a Lords member. So that's why through the community development team, we started to have other programs through seated ballet. And if that continues to be popular, there's no reason why we can't continue to expand to find that middle point.
Councillor Fife?
So I understand that a lot of the program that you're referring to with that seated yoga and whatever happens at the Shenton Park community, is there any, there are a lot of people that are, for one reason or another, not able to access those things. Maybe this belongs more in a workshop than in this budget meeting, but are there any capacity to expand those offerings of chair yoga into areas that are not controlled by the city, like Wandana or Shenton Village, or places where people are relatively isolated, but and would probably benefit from the connections that build from those types of things in places other than sites owned by the city?
Thank you. And through your presiding member, something we could take on board and have a chat. There's always considerations with the operators of those sites and how we might even be able to connect them with other programs that are ready to do those sorts of things, or even consider running a program there or something. So it's not a bad idea, but not something that we've thought of, and we can take that on board to consider.
Councillor Johnson?
Thank you. And I was wondering, I know this hasn't been something we've talked about before. I put it in my list of questions. You probably have answered it. About the possibility of installing a public toilet in Subi Common area, where we've got the playground, barbecue, and fabulous park area.
Director Hamby, I think.
Thank you, for you, presiding member. So there is a bit of history to this one. So as some councillors may be aware, so the city did approve many years ago, and I think it was about 2009, what was called a public toilet strategy, which was for the installation of new toilets throughout the city. So that included ones at the train station. There's also a few others that were put around the city, and also there was one at Lake Julep that was removed, so like an old toilet block. There were two that I'm aware that were put out for consultation. One was at Cliff Sadler, and another was at Subiaco Common. And in both instances, I believe, were strongly opposed by the residents. So at that stage, the projects were, and that was at that time, and that was about just over 10 years ago, and that those did not proceed. So those are the only two of that list that did not proceed. So obviously, it's open to council at the time to reconsider that. So if that's something that council wants to pursue, obviously what we're going through right now is a review of our public open space strategy, and so probably following that would be the most ideal time to look at the master plan and the design for Subiaco Common once we've elicited all that feedback from the community, because that might draw out other related feedback to other infrastructure related facilities for Subi Common. So I'd say if that was something the council wanted to revisit, that's probably the time to do it after that strategy and that initial part of community feedback.
If there aren't any other immediate questions, I've got a couple on the budget, if I can, please. Councillor Pine, if you've got a question, go ahead.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions on grants. I see we've got some grants in a provision in the budget. Can you confirm if these grants have been secured, or will they be secured, and by when?
CEO.
Thank you for you, presiding member. So yes, all the revenue that's showing up as grants would be those that we have certainty over that we will receive in the new financial year, whether we've via agreement or usual programs like our road rehabilitation program. So that's why that'd be included in the budget. And I know that there was an inquiry about a recent state government grant for, I guess, assisting with dealing with short hole borer. So that's something that the city has applied for, but obviously at the time of preparation of this budget, that was not confirmed, so that hasn't been included in the budget. But not to say that mid-year we might receive those funds, and actually that would actually bring down the overall net cost to our tree maintenance operations. So obviously that remains open to us, but the short answer is those are confirmed, and that's why they're in the budget. I don't know if the manager for finance had anything else to add.
Yes, and thank you through you, Chair. So as Director of Technical Services has confirmed, so all of the grant funding through our technical services area has been confirmed, which is what's in the budget for the 27 financial year. The only ones that aren't confirmed as of yet are the grants and contributions relating to the Onslow Park Tennis Club. So with an agreement with the tennis club, we have offered to put in $100,000 contribution from the city if they are able to obtain grant funding through a couple of other platforms and them themselves put in the grant funding. Because it's a major capital project on one of our buildings, the fund accounting treatment, we need to reflect the expenditure and all of the revenue side as well. So though we aren't the ones that are going to be submitting the grant application for a couple of those grants, we still need to reflect it through our books at the gross capacity, both within revenue and expenditure, not just our $100,000 contribution. But we are waiting for the Onslow Park Tennis Club to confirm that they have successfully received those grants.
Councillor Pine, you indicated you had another question as well.
Could I just
Yeah,
round that out if I can, Councillor Pine? Just one of the things that the budget's adopted, it's setting the plan for the upcoming year. But if there are other grants announced in any particular area that we either have funds allocated on an expenditure or capital side or not, it doesn't preclude us from applying and advising elected members that we intend to apply for those grants. And if they come through, we can put a report through to council to adjust the budget both on the revenue and expenditure or capital side, or as has been pointed out, that could just be adjusted through the half-year review. So just because the budget's adopted doesn't mean that we can't access new grants that may be announced in the future. We certainly can.
Councillor Pine, you said you had some other questions?
yeah, I do have one final question, and I guess it's when I was reading the report, we've got it's a year of reevaluation where the GRVs have increased significantly by 40% for residential, and by commercial they've only increased by 6%. So given that Subiaco is applying a common rate in the dollar, and that rate in dollar has been kept really, really low at 2.9%. Can you maybe comment on, because obviously the residential has, GRVs have increased significantly more. Can you comment on really, obviously residential increases overall will increase a lot more. Can you comment a little bit on that? Because it's not really stated in the report.
CEO.
Yeah, if I can, through the chair. So the point you pick up is quite important and important for the community to understand as well, because when you adopt the budget next week, assuming you do, council really only apply one side of a multiplication equation, and that is the rate in the dollar. The gross rental valuations that are provided by the Valuer General, we must use. Now, what I would encourage every person when they're issued with their rates is to go and have a look at what the GRV actually states. That's the first thing they should do, and then divide it by 52 weeks and work out whether or not they believe their place could be rented out for that purpose. Because that's for, if it was a GRV of 52,000, then obviously the Valuer General's assessed that they could rent that property out for $1,000 a week. There's lots of tools online that you can use to do that assessment. And if you think that is significantly wrong, you've got 60 days to appeal to the Valuer General. So I'd encourage people, you can do it both ways. If you think the valuation is too low, you certainly can appeal. And if you think it's too high and you want to give us some, if you think it's, if it's not high enough and you think it should be higher and you want to give us some more money and rates, we'd be happy for you to appeal as well. But the point that you make is quite right. Every 3 years, valuations, the change in the valuations and the magnitude of the change are quite different. And at the City of Subiaco, along with 5 other metro local governments, we just use one rate in the dollar. And some other locals use differential rating, where they may be able to smooth out those swings and roundabouts between residential and commercial. But we're unable to do that. So I think in about 2012, if I recall, it was the exact opposite. So commercial property valuations increased significantly in comparison to residential properties. So this time it's the other way, and I think most people would note that rents have increased significantly across the board in Subi. So there's nothing that we can do in the way in which we operate to smooth that out. Whether council wish to consider differential rates, there's some pros and cons in relation to that. You have to advertise it a lot sooner. You have to hope that the Valuer General will give you those values soon enough for you to be able to advertise them. Otherwise, you're going to be adopting your budget not in June, that's for sure, but probably July or August. So there is benefits in a revaluation year. There's also disadvantages to operating differential rates. But the city, from as far as I'm understanding, has continued to consider that one rate, regardless of whether it's commercial or residential, be the same. And in this year, the magnitude of increase significantly is greater for residential. But I would encourage each household, be it business or whatever, look at your gross rental value and consider whether or not the Valuer General's got that right. and you've got 60 days to appeal with evidence, and that may be changed, and we would need to apply the new GRV. I think I answered a long-winded answer to that, but hopefully there is benefits, but there's also other issues that one could consider. And like I said, about 2012, I think it was completely the other way, where commercial properties increased significantly in relation, and residential was much less. So,
Councillor De Vries.
This is by way of trying to understand the upgrades to parks and gardens, and there is a rotational process, and I understand that's pretty normal. Is it possible at all in any reporting of which parks and gardens will be updated, that be published, so that the community knows that there'll be some this year and then there'll be some next year? As I understand it, some of the Daglish parkland will be one of the targeted upgrades. Is that correct as well?
I presume that's Director Hamby.
Thank you for the question and for you, presiding member. It's a good point. Obviously, prior to any works, we want to let the community know what's coming. So, I guess it really would depend on the nature of work. So, if it's a slightly more significant works, we might have signage up beforehand. But what I think might be easiest would be just we can do this on our web page, just an update, just to make the communities aware of what projects are upcoming for the new year once the budget's approved. I think that's probably the simplest way.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. And in a similar vein to Councillor De Vries' question, the annual plan talks about additional facilities and infrastructure upgrades to community buildings being undertaken. I'm wondering what that will look like. What buildings is that? Tom Dador, Nicholson, and what are those infrastructure upgrades? Can we have some detail on that? Thanks.
Director Hamby.
Thank you. So, in respect to the buildings, obviously within the budget document, if you go towards the back, you will have the capital works program, which does list all the buildings where those works planned. So you can see on that a number of sites, including the Fallen Soldiers Memorial, which we've spoken about earlier. Obviously, projects that you'd be aware of, like Mount Claremont, and obviously the Rosalie pavilions, which was also mentioned earlier, are subject to some grants as well. So those are all detailed there as far as those buildings in question for works. So I'd recommend having a look at that. But if there's any other questions from that, by all means, reach out to staff.
Any other questions? Or Councillor Pine. Councillor Pine, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. In the budget, we've got a large numbers of projects which are in the study phase, such as the depot, the civic building, etc. Can you share a little bit how much budget provision has been made for the civic building and the depot next year?
CEO.
Yeah, I'll just get that in front of me. In terms of Mount Claremont Depot, there's a couple of components, which is capital in the capital schedules. But in addition to that, we've got just some design, and I'm just trying to get that in front of me. It's helping. So yeah, so at the moment, I think, yeah, I'm shuffling my papers.
So through you, presiding members, so for the civic precinct project, there is $1.3 million within materials and contracts within this year's budget, and $430,000 for the Mount Claremont Depot within materials and contracts. They're both within operating activities within the statement of financial activity.
Yeah, so if I could just jump in on that. So they're budget allocations that have been made in materials and contracts, so that we don't intend to capitalise that work. But it relies particularly on the civic precinct. We've taken that sort of as far as until we build the business plan and bring that back to council in accordance with the resolution of April 2026. So I wouldn't imagine, unless council proceeded with that, much of that budget would be used, other than experts that council may require for us to provide supporting documents for that business case. So I think it really depends on to what extent council proceed. The Mount Clermont site is progressing quite well in terms of design elements, and so we hope to bring that back to elected member workshop soon. But once again, that will inform whether or not or how soon we're able to go to tender for that works to be done. So it's a process of providing updates to council, but in terms of the civic precinct, the majority of that money would only be spent on the assumption that council wished to move, well, there was a report to council, business planning considered in accordance with the previous resolution, and council determined a particular option and way forward. That's what that would be used for.
Any further questions? Right, I get my chance to ask a couple. Just for the record, the rate increase is going to be 2.9%. That's what's planned. But income is going to rise by 4.6%. Can you explain how that actually works, please?
Yeah, I might jump in first, but essentially the yield or from the existing properties, they together, their rate increase is 2.9%, as in last year it was 1.9% in previous years. But Subiaco has new buildings that come, that are developed, so Wunderlich and Reuthaus, for example, those two new buildings come, and now they will be, all of those properties will be rated for a full year. So it's the growth in the properties that means that we actually, our revenue increases by greater than the 2.9 to about 4.6%. And we like to provide clarity for elected members so they're aware that it's both the yield and also we have some growth which is assisting manage our revenue side of things.
Thank you. I note in the budget that the operating income is going to be about $60 million, and operating expenditure I think is just on 66. So are we going to be about $5 million in the red? Is that what we're looking at this financial year?
I'll answer that first, and then perhaps those that the other accountants in the yeah, so one of the things, there's a couple of things going on. One is that we have a number of sort of one-off type projects that are in the materials and contracts employee costs in the coming year. So it's not like we've got a natural deficit year on year at what's going on? Okay. No, nobody knows gremlins. So ultimately, you need to go to the statement of financial activity, and that shows right to the bottom that the budget is balanced. So the budget is balanced across operating, capital, etc. So the two main things that are impacting on the budget in terms of at the net operating, so revenue less expenditure, is some of these digital transformation and a range of particular things, including, as I just described, the civic precinct, where we expense those. In addition, there's a range of other things that ordinarily in the past may well have been capitalised, and what we've been progressively doing is where we deem them not appropriate to capitalise, we expense them. So whilst the budget might, you look at that, you probably wouldn't want to have a deficit at net operating year on year if you're a metro council. If you're a country council, you definitely would have that anyway. But at that net operating, ideally in the longer term, you probably want to be closer to zero, which is generally where we've landed on the actual side. We generally get more revenue than we expect, and our expenses are less. So that's sort of where you'd ordinarily want to be year on year. If you got too much revenue, it could be that you're taxing too hard in terms of rates. And if you've got too much expenditure that is your base, then you would be concerned that you didn't have sufficient revenue. Whereas we know that within that expenses, we have a lot that are either one-off or they're peaking at the moment for a particular reason, and then they'll be reducing. So we're confident that we're not adding to base a significant net operating deficit.
Yeah, thank you. In the budget, it's also mentioned Rockaby Road North. I'm aware of Rockaby Road South, but what is Rockaby Road North? What are the plans there? Is that the development of direct? Yep.
No, thank you. And through you, presiding member. So that's some preliminary work to start to understand how we link in the train station and the development around the train station with the Woolworths and Coles, with the existing town centre, and the commencement of Rockaby Road and with the intersection of Roberts Road. So it's a little bit of pre-design work to understand how that area works together. Obviously, we've got a significant draw card in the train and some of the businesses there, and how we can continue to link the historical old and heritage valued Subiaco and those businesses there on our high street with the development north. There are also some additional work to look at how we might optimise Market Square. Now that's a place that's been working beautifully with the Subi night markets, and we also have Subiaco as well. So how we start connecting them, bringing a sense of place to those areas, making it easy for people to access, not just those places, but our town centre and around. So it's just some design work that might, in the future, inform preliminary moves that the council might make. There may also be some small moves as well, just to improve the places for our community.
And just one other one, the mention of the removal of some of the street furniture in Rockaby Road. I think that's Director Hanley.
Yes, thank you. So kind of tying with the work that the Director Development Services touched on, the overall main streets has been, I guess, an area of priority for the last few years. And one of the things that's been identified of late is quite a lot of, I wouldn't call it furniture necessarily, it's some infrastructure that's in particularly Rockaby Road. And it's things like street signs, parking signs, and you might have 3 sign poles within a metre of each other, all for different things. So what the intention is to get rid of some of these, I guess, redundant signs to clear up the streets, make it more accessible, actually, and also just improve the presentation of the main street. Also, there's also a number of other elements, so some bollards, some bike rails which don't get used, and some other fairly minor infrastructure in the main street. But once we go through and ideally clear some of that and I guess renew and replace and remove some of that, the idea is to actually improve the presentation of the whole main street, make it more accessible and improve the walkability of the area. So it's not a big schedule of works, but it will probably have a bit of an uplift to Rockaby Road.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the budget? Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. Just on that, the bike racks being removed, I know there are a lot of cyclists that cycle, particularly to the cafes in that area. So I know some of the bike racks do get used there. I mean, obviously they're not used all the time, but generally, I mean, removing bike paths seems a little contradictory to what we're trying to do. I'm just wondering, are we going to be replacing the ones that you remove?
Director Hanley.
Yes, thank you for your question. So for you, presiding member, so staff's got a very good idea as far as the infrastructure that's getting well used. So like the bike parking near Bruja, for instance, that kind of location. We've got a very good idea as far as where those items are working well, but we also have quite a good idea as far as the items where it's not working well. That and obviously through this we'll be consulting with the nearby businesses and other people as well to make sure that we don't remove something that we might not be aware of. It gets some use at some time. So so there'll be that consultative approach. We've obviously got a good understanding of as what the use of a lot of that infrastructure. And something like a bike rack, if we do remove it and just turn out that something needs to be done there, we can always replace it. But for the most part, we've got a very good idea and we would consult with the community as far as that before it happens. So I don't think there's going to be any loss of actual genuine use. What you'll find is there's a lot of infrastructure that's been there over time and it's just been built upon and never really been, I guess, reassessed.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you'd be consulting with the local cafes about the use of those bike racks. Thanks.
Any other questions on the budget? Councillor Pine. Go ahead,
Just one
Councillor.
question on the. Thank you. Just one question on the reserves. Could you maybe share a little bit on how much of the reserves are we drawing upon to fund next year's budgets, and what is it for? Thank you.
CEO.
So thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. So primarily, a lot of the draw from reserve that we do have is funding our capital works program across. So within the statement of financial activity, they're the two lines being acquisition of property, plant and equipment, and acquisition of infrastructure. So that in itself totals 17.6 million draw from reserve. Other things that we have been funding from reserve are those major operating projects, such as our civic precinct, so the $1.3 million there, as part of that entire project that has been planned to be funded from our buildings reserve. Other items include our loan repayments. There was the commission for the increased lease at Harborne Street, so $350,000 there. That's been funded from the investment reserve. The total line transactions for our transfers from reserve, there's about 130 of them, so I won't go through them all tonight, but if you want further detail, we can provide. But the primary part is our capital and those major projects within operating activities that we've mentioned earlier tonight.
Maybe if I could just jump in.
Thank you.
If you go to the back of the budget book and you look at the capital works, the schedule that we're referring to, that lists all those projects in the capital works that are funded from the reserve, some $15 million worth. It's big ticket items like Rockaby Road South, etc. And then, as Lauren was articulating, in addition to that, we also put in quite a lot to the reserve as well. And then it also depends upon whether or not those actually progress this year. For example, there's still probably some work to do in terms of the Shenton Park Community Centre. That's funded from reserve about $2 million, so we need to bring that back to the elected members. It might be some more consultation or not that we need to do. So sometimes, although we list them in the budget, sometimes those capital work projects, even though they're intended to be funded, as was Rockaby Road South was the year that's just gone. If the money isn't used that year, it just is retained within the reserve. So.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. And just following up that, the city has a number of reserve accounts that are, correct me, my understanding, they're specifically set up for the purpose, they are set up for specific purposes to enable us to draw down for capital works. So there's a direct alignment between the projects and the reserve funds that they're being drawn from. Is that correct?
Manager of Finance.
Okay, thank you for the question, through you, Chair. So yes, they all have a specific purpose, which does align to where we are funding each individual thing from those reserve. So within note 9, so page 17 of the statutory document, or notes 18 it flows onto. So we start with the page 17 has the reserve transfers, page 18 has the purposes for those reserves. We can link them up, but if you'd like further information on what reserves are funding what, we can provide. Our reserves, we do have a number of them. These have all been set by council, so none of these are set by legislation either. So council have control over what we do set these reserves up to be for. Through the budget process, we can change the purpose of reserve, and at any time throughout the financial year, if deemed needed by council, we can use funds from the reserve for a different purpose, though that does need to go through council resolution, local public notice. But otherwise, yes, everything that we are taking from the reserve now is for those purposes already set by council.
Yeah, probably what I was going to add, a good answer, was just to sort of clarify. Subi's quite unusual in that council has determined all of its reserves. So it is described in the budget and the annual financial statements what the definition that they need to be used for. At any time, council could change those as has been described. Many other local governments would have other reserves that are specific, like developer contribution schemes or some other that have other legislation that deem what they can be used for, whereas Subiaco is quite different in that regard. They've been set up in the past, that's what they are, but if the council determine for whatever purpose it could resolve either at budget or any other time to use them for a different purpose. But they have been increasing over time, and that's part of Subiaco's response to sort of intergenerational, financing in relation to 3.11A.
Are there any other questions? We'll move on to C7, financial statements and reports for the month ending 31st of May 2026. It's page 33 of the agenda. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Pine? Go ahead.
I have one question. It's really around the rate debtors. I see the rate debtors was close to $2 million at this time of year, while last year it was significantly less. Are there any particular reasons that you've noted that the debtors would be a lot higher for rates this year than last year?
Manager of Finance Services.
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. The biggest reason will be our schedule of when our rates payments were due this financial year. With our implementation of our new ERP system, we pushed everything back. Our final payment for instalment 4 was due on the 21st of May, though yes, before the end of this month, but not everyone does quite make that due date. With our transition into our new system as well, it's been quite a big process for our revenue team, so they haven't been able to do the amount of debt collection or reminder phone calls as they would in prior years. In addition to that, our pensioners or anyone with a concession, so pensioners and seniors, they're not due until the 30th of that rating year to still be eligible for their concession, and they don't accrue interest as well. So some pensioners do wait until the end of the financial year to make those payments. We did send out 180 reminder letters to them at the beginning of the month. So we have started to receive some of those payments. So since this report was done, as at today, we've received almost another 500,000 worth of rates payments.
That's right. I might just jump in if that's okay. Just for context, and it was mentioned about the system change to Technology 1 rates. And so as a new elected member, you would have missed the briefings on that. But for a conservative reason, we wanted to make sure that we had sufficient time to strike the rates, and that was done certainly later than ordinarily would have been. So we put the instalment dates back a couple of months, and that provided sufficient time. I think the first instalment was October, November. I'm trying to remember. October, yeah. But most local governments anyway would probably target around wanting about 5% of rates at the end of the financial year would be a reasonable approach, and so we're certainly above that or around that. So, so in that regard, even though the actual process by which we collected rates was significantly delayed to make sure that we had our systems working properly, which they did, which was amazing. Our collection on rates has still been pretty good. It is different from previous years because that started much earlier.
So with new rates, notices that will go out in due course, how do you identify who's a pensioner and who's not, and who's eligible for these deferred payments?
Manager of Financial Services.
So thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. So anyone who is eligible for a pensioner or senior concession is to apply through the Water Corporation with their card details. So you get a pensioner card and you get a number. You lodge that through the Water Corporation. They then pass the information on to us. There are dates around eligibility, and once we get them from the Water Corp, we will then process them through our system. We do a little bit of a hold in between the 1 July and when we strike our rates, just to get through all of our administration process, just to get that process. Anyone who has applied during that period of time. We will then, once the first rate notice has been issued, we will then do what's called an interim adjustment, and you'll get a second notice with that rebate applied to your rate notice. But it's all done through the Water Corp, and then that's passed through to us.
I might just add one more if that's okay. Subiaco is quite generous in terms of providing further discounts that most other local governments don't in relation to the waste collection fee as well. So good on you, Subi. That was well before my time.
Just with that one. So for our waste charge, we do offer a 50% discount to our pensioners, though you need to be registered with us on 1 July for that one to be eligible. If your concession comes through after 1 July, you don't get that on your waste rebate until the following financial year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, that brings the agenda briefing forum to a close. Please note there will be a confidential item at next week's OCM in relation to the CEO performance review. That'll be required to go behind closed doors in accordance with section 5.23 of the Local Government Act of 1995. Thank you all for attending. I hereby declare the City of Subiaco Agenda Briefing Forum of the 23rd of June 2026 closed at 7:10 p.m. Thank you all.